Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Event Space. You're tuned into DPO Flow, how to streamline your digital ecosystem with Caroline Guntur. Of course, this is part of Save Your Photos Month with the Photo Managers, and we've expanded it beyond just saving your photos. The Photo Managers go way beyond there. It's save them, archive them, organize them, declutter them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Caroline, welcome. Lovely to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. I'm going to let you do your thing and get started. I will let everybody know Caroline is traveling, so she's on the road. So if there's a little bit of a hiccup in the signal, it's technical difficulties, no issues. We'll iron everything out. But Caroline, take it away. I will remind everybody, if you do have any questions, drop it into the YouTube chat, and I will see you in a bit for some Q&A. And it looks like we might have a little hiccup there. So we're going to get that ironed out real quick and get Caroline back on. I will remind everybody, if you're already watching us on YouTube, you know where to find us. You can find this, all of our other archived content there. And it looks like Caroline's rejoining us. There we go. Welcome back. Long time no see.
Thank you.
All right, Caroline, I'll let you take it away, and I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, and maybe if I could just get a confirmation that you can see this clearly, that would be great.
Yep, we do see it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. So thank you for having me. This is a topic that I'm super excited about. I am a certified photo organizer, and for those of you who don't know, there's such a thing. Yes, there's such a thing. I'm also a 10-year Golden Circle member with NAPO, which is the National Association of Organizing and Productivity Professionals. And I am an advisory board member with the Photo Mangers. And my full-time living is basically teaching this stuff. I teach photo organizing, I teach systems and operations, digital asset management, productivity, and project management. And I do have a best-selling course called DPO Pro, which I've had since 2016. So I have been doing this for a long time, and it's, again, a topic that I'm super passionate about. So I'm so excited to be here for Save Your Photos Month. If there's any questions or if I don't get to anything and you're wondering about something, you can find me over at the Swedish Organizer, as well as I have a dedicated blog at organizingphotos.net. So I'm always happy and open to answer questions if we don't get to everything today. But what I want to talk about today are a few things around when you're getting started organizing your photos. We're going to talk about the biggest mistakes that people make. I find that it's really important to address those. So hopefully that saves you a lot of time and headache, and why I want you to rethink your strategy, and as well as how to design and streamline your digital ecosystem, because it's so important that you get that up and running before you start organizing. So first, let's jump into the three biggest mistakes. And again, this is something I've spent a lot of time helping people with. I've seen this happen over and over again, and my goal is to sort of save you a lot of the hassles that come along with doing this. Sometimes it's not, easy to know what you don't know when you're new to something. So this is what I see again and again that I just feel like I have to address. So the first thing that people tend to do when they are feeling overwhelmed with their photos is they tend to go, okay, I really want to get organized. I'm feeling scattered. I'm feeling stressed around this. I want to do more with my photos. And so what they do is they try to look for the perfect photo program to help them out, to kind of fix the problem. And what they do is they go to Google and they put in what is the best photo organizing software. And while that is, a strategy that could work, it's also going to feel super overwhelming because it is an endless rabbit hole. You're going to get a gazillion results, and it's all going to be subjective because, as we know, there are amazing tools out there, but there is no such thing as a perfect photo program. And what you're going to end up with, is decision fatigue. And you're going to go, oh my goodness, there's so much out there. What should I choose? Should I go with Apple Photos or Mylio or Bridge or Google or Lightroom, Capture One, Photo Mechanic? There's so many programs out there. They all have their pros and cons. And I think the trickiest thing here is to try and cut down on the overwhelm. So what I always try to tell people is that instead of thinking about it from the vantage point of what program am I going to use, I'd like you to think of it as learning the skills first. We don't want to try and confuse the tool with actually understanding the skill or understanding how to organize. It's kind of like driving a car, right? When you're first getting started, it's a little bit scary. You don't know the rules of the road, and you're trying to understand and learn how to, manage this vehicle and how to interact with all the other drivers. And it's kind of the same thing with any skill. It's like you have to learn how to drive first in order to then basically pick up any car and go where you want to go. So it's the same thing with photo programs or any other software that you're trying to learn. You want to have an overview first of how the organizing process works and what the rules of the road are and how you're supposed to do this and how it's supposed to go without picking the tool. So we want to learn how to drive first, and I could actually switch out all of these different logos with car brands and it would be the exact same thing. Do you want to drive a Lexus? Do you want to drive, a Honda? Do you want to drive a Tesla? It's the same thing. They're all going to give you a bit different experience, but without you understanding how to drive, you're not going to get very far. So you can have the fanciest car in the world and pay a ton of money for it, but if it's sitting in your garage, it's not going to do you any good, right? So that's what I always come back to with people is that we have to learn the skill of organizing first and understand how it works and what the rules are before we can actually get into thinking logically about what software to choose. Technology changes super fast and photos are going to keep coming throughout your life, right? So that's why it's important to understand and actually learn this skill. And then that way you can then replace devices, services at any time without having problems, because at some point, maybe you switched phone manufacturers, or maybe you go from a PC to a Mac or the other way around. And then it's super important that you don't start all the way over again, right? So always think of it that way. It's like, what skills, do I want to learn here? And do I have them already, or do I need to improve something? And people will always say to me, oh, I'm just not that good at organizing. I don't know how to do that. That's actually not a thing. Organizing skills are learned. I've learned them, so I know that you can learn them too. I firmly believe that nobody is born organized. We learn organizing skills throughout life, and every now and then we have to refresh ourselves and figure out what we're lacking in. But this is absolutely something that you can learn. It's not something that comes naturally to most people. So just know that even if maybe you aren't sure how to do this now, it's something that you can absolutely pick up pretty quickly. And then mistake number 2 that I see all the time is that people tend to focus specifically on the organization because that's the solution that they imagine. But the reality is that you often need to consolidate first. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. So when I talk to a new client or somebody who's just interested in getting a project like this started, I ask them, well, where are your photos right now? And then I get a whole long list usually that looks something like this. And they'll say, well, I have 2 or 3 iPhones. Maybe they have separate cloud accounts. There's one for me, one for my husband, one for my daughter. And then they say, well, there's those 3 older phones that we have. And I don't know if I got all the photos off of it. I think so, but I'm not quite sure how it works. Then we have several external hard drives with old backups. We're not quite sure what those backups are. We kind of forgot because we didn't label them well. And then there's all these flash drives where we transferred files. I'm not sure what's on there. We get email attachments all the time. We have a couple of cloud accounts, so usually Dropbox, Google, or something like that. Oh, yeah, we went to Disneyland and we got those memory DVDs, and I have a couple of CD-ROMs from the 90s, and that old laptop has some files on it. And I think I imported them all into some software, but I'm not sure which one. And yes, of course, there's those 18 banker boxes full of printed photos that I inherited as well. So I want to scan those and get those in there. So do you see how when you have a long list like this, it's very hard to get organized. It can feel very overwhelming. And the reason is because it's not consolidated, because you cannot organize what you can't access. Actually, that should be can't on the screen there. My apologies. You cannot organize what you can't access. So we always should consolidate first. And that goes for any organizing project that you work on in your home. You know, I used to do residential organizing as well, and it's the same thing there. If you are trying to get your closet organized, the first thing you do is that you have to have all your clothes right by the closet so we know what we have. It's very hard to organize it, you know, if some of it's in the laundry room and some of it's at the dry cleaners, right? We have to have everything in front of us before we start. So we always consolidate first, and then we organize second. And all your photos need to be conveniently accessible to you and then stored in that one place so that we can locate them all. Because location is not necessarily the same thing. So if you think back, for example, to what I just said about, you know, the CD-ROMs and the flash drives and all of that, they can, the photos can be there and they can be on those drives, right? But if you have no way of playing those drives, for example, if you don't have a CD player or a DVD player, then you can't access them. So we have to make sure that everything is in front of us and accessible to us in one place so that we can then have it consolidated. And then we can back it up. We always back up the mess, and then we can organize it. Because without consolidation here and having an understanding what a streamlined digital ecosystem looks like, the organization effort falls apart. So remember that if you can, you're off to a great start. You always consolidate first, then you organize second. So the question becomes, where are your photos? Is the answer clear enough? Because if you're sitting with a long list like that, it is not clear enough. And if not, then you are not ready to organize. Organization is about how you find your photos inside of your system, but the system has to exist first before you can decide on how to organize. So some systems are created for you. For example, a closet in a home, you know, that's an obvious system that we're all very familiar with. Other systems are not provided for you, and you have to step in and set them up yourself. And usually photos, you know, it becomes one of those systems that you kind of have to step in there and design it intentionally by yourself. So then mistake number 3 is not having a clear plan of action. And what happens when we sort of see people sort of, you know, get that initial, you know, what do you call it? Like the motivation that pops in, maybe the New Year's resolution or whatever that is, that first sort of energetic spurt of, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get things organized. That kind of quickly wears off because it can be a big an overwhelming project. And so you're not going to finish it, you know, in one day. And then you end up starting over and over again. So it's very important that we have a clear plan of action and a strategy for how to approach this and what the steps are before we get started. Without a clear plan, you get overwhelmed. It happens every time. The project just becomes too big, and then you feel really flustered about what to do. Then you start worrying about making mistakes, and maybe you forgot where you left off. So you create more backups because you start to doubt yourself and what you were doing. And then you actually end up with a bigger mess than when you started. And then eventually you give up and the problem actually doesn't get solved at all. It gets worse and worse and you're still disorganized. And we don't want that to happen. So we need a really clear path forward with a solid strategy in place. Your digital ecosystem needs to be planned out before it's implemented. Like I said, we need to create the system intentionally, and then we organize. And just to give you an analogy, right? What architect starts building a building without a plan and a blueprint, right? In all of project management, in all projects that you take on, there has to be some sort of plan for what the steps are and how you're going to implement it. You have to create the system. Planning works because it reduces overwhelm. Overwhelm and insecurity and doubt and all of those feelings that you feel when you're starting a project like this, that is just a response to you not knowing enough about the process and not being certain about what the next steps are. So when you break things down, then you're overcoming those feelings because you understand what needs to happen, you understand how to go about it, and then you get confidence in the process and in yourself that, oh yeah, I know what to do now, I can do that. So with a clear plan, it's super easy to get organized. Without one, it's near impossible. And I'm going to say actually impossible because you just end up creating more and more work for yourself. So it's really important that we take a moment here, and even though we are eager to sort of solve the problem here, that we don't jump into it without creating some sort of strategy for ourselves. So before you organize, you need to understand the organizing process as a whole, and it really helps if you have a bird's eye view of that, as well as the rules of the rules of the road. And then we always have to consolidate everything that we're going to organize, and then we have to create a solid plan of action so that we know what we're doing and what the steps are. And that also reduces all the overwhelm. You know how to space out the project, and you can actually get it done. So I want you to rethink your strategy. And obviously, you're going to go, well, where do you start with all of this? Well, where I recommend people start is by drawing out the workflow. And my process that I've developed over the years is called DPO Flow. So DPO, for those of you who don't know, stands for Digital Photo Organizing. That's kind of what we in the industry just call it for short. So DPO is Digital Photo Organizing, and Flow is just short for the workflow. So that when you draw that out, you can think of it as a blueprint. It helps you understand how photos move between your devices and between your services in your digital ecosystem. And what it means is that you basically design where your photos go from A to B to C. And you make the path as easy as possible for the photos. So they have a clear and ideally an automatic way of getting to your photo hub, where you store everything. And so that you can keep it saved and consistently backed up. And whatever devices and services that you use don't actually matter as much. People always, again, ask me, like, what's the best photo organizing software? It doesn't really matter as long as it's something that you enjoy, because when you enjoy it, you use it. The biggest thing here is consolidation every single time. And what we do is we start with this DPO flow process so that we understand what the system is going to look like and how it's going to function and work. And then we can get into the specifics of what we're doing with, the details. It's really important that you do this DPO flow process because it helps you visualize how the system should work, and that gives you a clear picture of your goal. And then it lays the foundation for all of your organization. And when you do it, you actually create a system that you can switch out bits and pieces of, so that anytime you have a new phone or a new computer or anything like that, you don't have any disruption to it. It's an actual system that works really well, no matter what pieces, you exchange. And so that's how I approach this. And it's been super helpful to do it that way. And I find that all of my students and clients, when they see this visually, it really creates a lot more ease around the process because they can visually see what needs to happen. Understanding your DPO flow, your workflow, means that you understand exactly where your photos are stored, how your digital ecosystem works, and how photos move between tools and devices in your, little digital universe. And you can do your own, you can do it for your family. It depends on, how many devices basically you want to consolidate and all of that. You can do it for a business. I've done it for organizations. We've done it for associations and nonprofits. So there's really no limit here. The only difference is that the consideration, gets more and more. Obviously, the more devices and the more people you have involved. But here is a simplified version of what this looks like. So this is the first picture that I usually share with people to kind of give them an idea for how this all works. And you can think of it as an organizing transaction. So in the middle here, we have the DPH. It stands for Digital Photo Hub, and that is what we call your photo home. And that is that one location that you designate to make sure that you know where all your photos live. And that is also then what we back up. And normally we recommend that you adhere to the 3-2-1 rule of backing up, which means, 3 different versions on 2 different media and at least 1 offsite. I have 3 backups here, A, B, and C. 2 would be sufficient, but there's never any harm in having another backup somewhere. As long as you are labeling them clearly and you understand your flow and all of that, then better safe than sorry, in my opinion. And on the left, it's basically all the original sources, your inputs, where photos are coming from. So it can come from the cloud, it can come from emails, your DSLR, your phone is obviously the most common one here. It could be old media that you're scanning in or transferring. It doesn't really matter. They're all inputs. We usually have 2 different kinds. We have one type, we have recurring. So an example of a recurring one would be your phone. The photos are going to keep coming over and over again, and it's going to be continuous. Whereas a CD or a DVD or negatives or slides or any old media, things like that, analog prints perhaps, that is going to be more of a one-time import. But regardless of where it comes from, it all needs to be consolidated and live on your digital photo hub so that we can then back that up and keep that safe and consolidated. The DPH is then also what we organize. Usually use a tool or software or something to do that. But you can see that that's not really an issue at this point. We just need to figure out what that DPH is. It could be a cloud account, a computer, it could be an external hard drive. That is something that we decide when we look at your specific situation. And then on the right, we have what we call the outputs. So what we are creating with our photos, because photos are meant to be enjoyed, right? And so many of us now have trouble making something fun with our photos because we cannot find them. We don't look at them again on our devices. They're so scattered. But that is actually the point, of why you took them in the first place. So we always want to make sure that we have some sort of fun outlet or something fun going on where you're either creating more prints or books or presents or doing something fun with them. I created a photo wall for my office last month myself, which was really fun. So we always want to come back to sort of what the purpose is of why we take photos, and that's the outputs. So again, just to recap, we have the inputs on the left. All of the photos go into a digital photo home, and then we export from there to create projects. And the DPH, the photo home, is then what we back up. So that is the simplified version of what this looks like. That's the idea, the blueprint. And when you draw this out for yourself, you are actually planning out what the next steps are naturally. It helps you tackle the mess because you see what you need to consolidate, and then it actually reveals your ideal photo system for you, because you're going to see, based on what devices you have and what goals you have and what you want to create, you're going to go, oh yeah, actually Google would be really good for that, or Apple Photos would be ideal because I already have all these devices that have. So you're going to see little by little your plans start to form. And that's how we get to our strategy and how we're going to implement it. So how do you then design all of this? Well, we want to streamline as much as possible, and we want to design it intentionally for ourselves. And again, whether you're designing it for yourself and your family members, or for a business or something else, as long as it's intentional, you'll be okay. Understanding how this ecosystem works is actually the most underrated part of photo management. It's easily, though, the most impactful. I can't tell you the number of students who come into my classes, and once the consolidation and the ecosystem is done, they go, actually, I feel quite satisfied with that. And they haven't even gotten at that point to the organizing yet. But that entire system of and understanding how it works is such a relief that once they see that their photos are backed up and they're consolidated and they can actually point to some place where they are all located, that is sort of a huge weight off their shoulders. So a lot of this anxiety that we have nowadays comes from not understanding how the system works. And once we sort that out, usually it's a lot easier to deal with any organization and anything fun. And you need to be very clear on how it works. Once you're clear on how it works, then everything is going to be so much smoother. So how do you then design this? Well, the first thing you do is you create a list. You take inventory of all of the places where your photos live. So all of your devices, all of the accounts that you have, all of the storage spots. We like to, in fact, call them digital graveyards. There are usually quite a few of them floating around online. It's when you kind of try a new storage place or a new system or a new tool, and you upload a couple of photos and then they kind of just live there. It also tends to be the places where maybe you have created photo books, like Mixbooks or Shutterfly or places like that, where photos are sometimes hiding. And so we want to make sure that we understand, well, right now, what is the status quo? Where does everything live right now? What devices do we have to deal with? What accounts are we managing, and what spots are we looking at here? So here's an example of what that could look like. You want to take a piece of paper, or again, you can do this in a digital notebook if you want to, and you want to write down everything. And if you feel like it helps, you can create two columns, one that's called one time and one that's called recurring. And for the one time, we usually have some old media. We usually have like flash drives and hard drives and CDs and DVDs and things like that. The print photos, the negatives, the slides, all of those things. That's where they end up, in that one-time column. And then for recurring, we usually have our phones there, cloud accounts, occasional email attachments, or texted photos, right? So think the continuous sort of streams of photos where they're going to keep coming at you. And it's also super helpful if you can't put numbers to this. I know that's sometimes difficult, but it does really help if you see how many photos you have or how much media you have to sort, because then you'll naturally know how much storage you need. Now, we don't always necessarily do that, because if you have a big external hard drive that can take 8 TB, for example, then it's usually not a problem. But if you have, let's say, a laptop that has limited storage on it, or if you only have phones or something else, then it's much more important that you put numbers to this. So we want to take a good long hard look at the inventory here and understand, like, what are we dealing with here, and how are we going to consolidate this. And then what we do is we take a piece of paper and a pen, and we draw out the current digital ecosystem the way it looks right now. So not the ideal one, the one you want to create, but actually what it looks like right now, so we can understand what's actually going on. And I actually like to do this in mind mapping tools. I use Whimsical with my students. That's my favorite. You could also do it in something like Miro or even Canva, or any type of digital drawing program that can let you sketch this out. You can do that in that. And again, if we come back to this, I'm going to show you how I do this. But we have the inputs on the left, the photo home in the middle, that's being backed up, and then the outputs on the right. Here is also an example of a handout that I give to a lot of my students, just to kind of simplify it. And if you want this handout, feel free to email me and I'll get it to you. But you can also just draw this out very quickly for yourself. So here is an example of a workflow that I just spoke with a client about, and she gave me permission to share this. This is the first draft of what's currently happening in her system, and this is what we're going to sort out for her. So as you can see, it can get pretty messy pretty quickly. And like, again, this is just the first draft, but this is what's currently going on in her system. She has 2 Apple iPhones, one for her and one for her husband, and both of them get texted photos and emailed photos quite often. And they tend to save that to the camera roll, but they're not consistent in the selection of how and when they do that. So it's sort of this question mark always of, did I save a photo or did I not? They don't really have a rule for when they do that. Same with the emails, every now and then something will come in, but they don't really have a rule for how and when they save it. In fact, a lot of the time they kind of just save it to their computer randomly into the downloads folder instead of to the camera roll on the phone. So you can see that the line there that says manual import, that's one option there, but then the texted photos kind of get saved to the camera roll. And one of the Apple iPhones actually gets the selected photo gets backed up to Google Photos, which you see on the bottom underneath the iMac computer there. And the other one gets backed up to Dropbox. And because they're different phones, those are different photos going to different places. So one phone is not accessing the Dropbox, one is not accessing Google. Both of the phones have also a sync going to iCloud, and they're separate iCloud accounts. One is being synced to the iMac computer, the other one, she wasn't really sure. And that's something that her and I have to take a look at and actually see if it is or not. But she has this big iMac computer in her home, and that's what she wants to use. And currently, she's not quite sure how Apple Photos works. And again, not quite sure if that sync to iCloud is actually happening as she suspects that it is. So we kind of drew that out hypothetically here. We have to dig in more and take a look at what's going on there. But you can see that there's a lot of question marks here. She also was very clear on the fact that she has no photo projects. That was one of the frustrations when we drew this out, is that she really wanted to create photo books, and that's one of her passions, one of the things that she really likes, but she hasn't been able to do that lately because she just can't find what she wants, and she just gets very frustrated anytime she tries to get something like this going. And that iMac computer, on a good note, it is being backed up with Time Machine, so she has a full computer backup going there, but she doesn't really know what Time Machine is catching, if you know what I mean. Like, she's not quite sure if the photos are actually being pulled into that backup as high resolution photos or as thumbnails, or if the sync is going straight, or all of that. She's very frustrated around not understanding what the system looks like. And again, you can see too with the iMac computer here that while there is a full Time Machine backup, Google Photos and Dropbox are actually not going through the computer at all. Like the photos that are going there are not necessarily passing through the iMac. We don't know for sure yet. Some of them are going to iCloud. All of them are going to Dropbox and Google apparently, or selected, but she's just not sure which ones are going where. And I think that's the big source of frustration here. So you can see that when you start to draw this out, you can kind of understand why you might feel frustrated, or why you're, annoyed with how overwhelming this looks. It's because it is a little bit tricky to figure this out. But drawing this out is the first step to actually get a full overview of what are the problems here and what's going on. That's what we need to understand. Then once you have this sort of status quo identified, we want to make sure and review it, and we want to identify what the problem areas are, right? Plus which ones are one-time streams, like the one-time imports, like the old media, and then which ones are the recurring streams that are coming again and again. So if you can see here, we've just started to sort of poke holes in this little DPO flow here. So inconsistent saving and inconsistent sync is the bigger problems here. They're not quite sure what's syncing to where, and they don't have any rules on when they do what, right? So that's where all this frustration is coming from. They're not quite sure where all the photos live, and I suspect we're going to dig into this more, in 2 weeks, but I suspect that there is less consolidation than she actually thinks going on here. She's not able to do anything fun with her photos, and that's again what prompted this, but no wonder, right? Because you can see how sort of messy this feels. And then all the old media that she has, that huge backlog, over 10,000 photos that she has to scan, that feels like this heavy weight on her. But that's actually a completely separate project. So that's another thing that we have to tackle. But overall, the one thing that I really enjoyed seeing here was that, the time machine was going and her computer was backed up. So if we can really just kind of get the syncs going on this, uh, she should be seeing a huge improvement, in very short time. So we have to figure out, what streams are going to go where, what backups are we going to use, and then what fun is she going to do? And as you do that, it starts to tighten up this workflow and it gets less and less overwhelming. So once you have this and you've sort of picked holes in everything that's going on, then you have an idea for how the ideal DPO flow should look like, right? And then you update it to create a new plan for what you want it to look like going forward. So here is again the first draft that we've come up with that I've helped her with. This is going to be a starting point for her plan going forward. And again, we still have a little bit of work to do on this, but you can see that already it starts to look much better. So if you look on the middle here, she is going to have her big iMac computer and she's going to use Apple Photos. And the reason we went with Apple Photos is because she already has 2 iPhones. She's already got iCloud, going. And she really loves, the look and feel and the ease of that program. She's not opposed to syncing it all or anything like that. She just wasn't quite sure where things were going. So as soon as she's going to be, clear on all of that, it's not going to be an issue anymore. So what we've decided, at least preliminarily, is that we're going to have the iPhones sync to each iCloud. It's going to be a shared library that's then going to go to the iMac computer and Apple Photos there. That's going to then be backed up with the time machine. She's going to do a cloud backup, possibly to Google Photos, and maybe a selective sync to Dropbox, depending on if there's anything she needs to do for work. And she's going to save, and she
think we lost Caroline's audio. We're going to give her a moment to get back on here.
Okay, let me pause and double check here if you can still hear me.
Yep, we got you back now, Caroline.
Okay, where did I leave off?
On that last, if you pull that last slide up, we lost your shared screen.
Okay.
Let you know right where you were in the
Yep.
the workflow schematic.
Let me share this again.
All right, let's see. All right, so we were just discussing time machine. So you have some going to the time machine, and then you have the selective sync to Dropbox, Google Photos.
Yep. 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 Okay, so perfect. So I was just saying that she's decided we're still going to do the full computer backup to time machine and then a cloud backup to Google Photos. She really enjoys sort of Google Photos on the go, even though she has Apple Photos and doesn't necessarily need it. A lot of her friends use Google, and she just felt like, okay, that could be, a fun thing to just have, and then that could be a backup too. So why not? And then she was going to do a selective sync possibly to Dropbox, because she has a few work photos here and there, and she might want to use that and pull that in. So you can kind of see, that once you start, strategizing and actually drawing out what's currently going on, it becomes a lot easier to understand why you're feeling confused and why you're feeling sort of stressed or frustrated by, not having a clear system in front of you. And the minute you start getting a handle on where things are going and why, it starts to reveal itself, so she could right away kind of go like, oh yeah, Apple Photos makes a lot of sense here because we already have the phones, we already have iCloud, and Dropbox and Google, while great, it's not the main system that we're working with here. It's already on my computer and I already kind of know how to use it. And what we've decided too, well, one idea at least, is that she's going to export photos to do framed photos for her wall in her house. And for her kitchen, she has like a little memory board in her kitchen, where she's going to put new photos. And then to sort of feed that passion for photo books, she's going to do a plugin and do photo books with notebooks in Apple Photos. So now you can see that we kind of have the inputs that are recurring all of the one-time stuff is going to be a separate project once this is all figured out. And now, even if she ends up switching a phone or switching a computer, she can kind of see, what needs to happen, because you can tell, like, oh, if I switch this out, that's going to affect this and that's going to affect this, and oh, I have to do this and reconnect this. It just becomes a lot easier to understand when you see it like this. And we're also visual nowadays, that I just find that having a clear understanding of this is such a game changer for most people. And we haven't even gotten to the organization part again, because remember, within Apple Photos, she can then use keywords and facial recognition and shared albums and smart albums and regular albums and folders and all kinds of stuff to then find her photos faster. But even if she never gets to any of that organization, she can still pinpoint to that one place where her photos are, and it's Apple Photos. So she knows that if she's going to open Apple Photos, yes, it's going to be a bit of a scroll, perhaps, to find the exact right photo, but she will be able to find it eventually. Now, the organization will then come in with, like, okay, now I want to find it, within a minute or two. So let's put some keywords on these photos. Let's put, some facial recognition here, and let's make some albums to get this process running just a little bit smoother. But just the fact that she understands the system is going to be a huge game changer. So again, this is a first draft, but I wanted to show this to you because I find that it's helpful to see that everybody has a very complicated sort of digital life nowadays. We have so many devices and so many photos coming at us from all different places, and it's not easy to have a grip on all of it. But when you draw it out like this, you have a much better chance of success and a much easier time understanding what your next steps are. So I hope that was helpful to see. Obviously, after that, when you see the plan take shape and the strategy sort of reveal itself, then you implement that one step at a time. So the first thing is to figure out, do I sync the first phone, and is that working? And then the second phone, is that working? Now let's go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And one step at a time, you get that new workflow up and running. And then you have that plan. You can print it out, put it on your wall. I even have clients who put it in their estate planning so that other people, if something happens to them, they can go in and see where photos live and how to access them. That is how we do this. That is how we attack the digital ecosystem before we even get to organizing. And just a few tips, as I'm wrapping up here. I sometimes get the question of, should I do the older media first? I'm so worried about losing my print photos, and I want to make sure they're scanned and preserved. And that's all completely understandable. But we always recommend starting with the digital ecosystem first. And the reason for that is the same reason that I mentioned earlier. It's that is a one-time thing that needs to happen, whereas the photo streams that are recurring, they're going to keep coming at you every single day. There's going to be new events and new things that you take pictures of. And in order to sort of make sure that doesn't create a backlog on you, or that doesn't get any messier, we simplify the ecosystem first. And then when you get to the scanning, you have something to scan into. Because otherwise, you're going to find that you're going to start over again with the scanning. You're not going to be able to remember where you put all of those scans. Like, is it in that folder or this folder? It's going to add more digital mess to your world. So we start by consolidating the digital ecosystem, and then we go ahead and we scan into that system later on. And then another thing that I also want to point out here is that the more time you spend on outlining a workflow like this, and if you're crystal clear on how it works, the easier the rest of this project is going to be. All of the ambiguity and all of the difficulty that you have usually comes from the fact that you're not understanding how the system works. So the more time you take on this and the more crystal clear you are on it, the easier everything else will be. As pros, when we get a system like this, like if I set up a system for a client, for example, I spend probably 60 to 70% on creating an ideal photo ecosystem for them. Because once I have that plan, everything else is so much smoother. And then getting the rest of the stuff organized is just easier. Plus, it also gets things backed up really quickly, which is, the number one goal, because we can always organize better. We can always make things look prettier. We cannot do anything if the photos are gone, right? We need to keep them safe. That's number one. And the way we do that is by consolidating and getting those backups up and running. Then we can take time in organizing it and making it as pretty as possible and as fast as possible for you to find all your photos. We always want to adhere as much as possible to the 3-2-1 rule, backing up, again, making sure that we have a diversified sort of backup system so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And again, it's to make those photos safe and make sure that we can get back everything if something were to happen. And also, again, motivation sometimes is a lot easier if you have something fun that you're looking forward to doing with your photos. So whether it is creating, a photo wall or photo books or gifts for somebody, put that on your workflow as well to make sure that you have that in the back of your mind as a strong why, and a motivation piece for why you're doing this. All right, so let me just do a quick recap here and then we'll get into Q&A. Design your digital ecosystem first to work for you, using the services, devices, and solutions that you enjoy. I find that there's no point in comparing to other people. They might not have the same devices. They might not have the same goals as you. Create it around you so that you are going to look forward to using it. That's how you get the most out of it. Understand the DPO flow in detail so that you're crystal clear on where your photos live and how they're backed up. If you don't understand syncing, do some research on it. Make sure you understand if it's a one-way sync or a two-way sync. Have to be absolutely crystal clear. And that goes back to learning those skills that I talked about up front of understanding, the more about the process and actually what needs to happen in the process of organizing photos. You're going to do so much better when you understand that. Always consolidate before you organize anything. That goes for any organizing project that you do, whether it's, pants or dishes or photos or whatever you're organizing. That is always step one. And then keep your DPO flow over time. And as technology changes, update it. It is a working plan. Just like I have a copy of the blueprint for my house, I have a copy of the blueprint for my photo ecosystem. And it is something that, I can update whenever I find a new device or a new tool that I want to play with. And that's how we keep everything streamlined and don't have a backlog. All right, so let me pause my screen there and stop the share, and let's get back into Q&A. Hopefully I didn't cut out much throughout
No,
that.
you're good. One little hiccup there, but we got it ironed out.
Perfect.
And
Okay.
we do have some questions coming in. I'll start it for question for the non-Apple people. So we have some PC people out
Yeah.
there. Is there any suggestions for PC people in regards of not having the accessibility of Time Machine and Apple Photos? Is there a more generic way for them to back up phone photos and kind of
Yeah.
work that into the same workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that comes up all the time. I find that a lot of my students like Microsoft OneDrive and Dropbox. And there's also, a couple of backup tools. Paragon has a few backup tools that you can implement. So it's kind of looking at your system and figuring out, what do I have right now and what do I need? A lot of people don't need to implement a whole lot of new stuff. It's usually they have a lot of the tools. In fact, a lot of the times we have to subtract and simplify because they have too many things. So it's more a matter of picking what they enjoy the most. But yeah, of course, Apple Photos makes it really easy for all of us. They do a fantastic job of simplifying. But I think OneDrive is also upping their game.
Okay. Now, in sticking with the Apple, now this for the Apple people, myself included, you do everything right,
Sure.
you organize everything, but then you get a new phone, and it's like I feel like we just keep accumulating whenever you sync
Hmm.
your photos, and then it's like, okay, if I offload all this stuff, do I really need to constantly sync my photos so that way I get a new phone, and instead of the old days of starting from scratch with your camera roll or your gallery, you're not starting from scratch. You're importing everything from your last phone. So if you were out of space and already running off the cloud on your last phone, you're picking up where you left
Yeah.
off. Is there anything that you suggest as far as that situation?
Yeah, it's gotten a lot more complicated, I feel like, but I think it comes down to deciding whether like what your method is, your preferred method. Like, do you want to use your phone as a transportation sort of device, like like iCloud, for example? Do you want to use it as a transportation system to get to your photo hub, or do you want it to be always accessible on your phone? That's a different scenario, right? So I think it just comes down to deciding, do I always have to have everything available on that one device? And if so, you're going to want to have as much storage as possible. You're always going to have to probably optimize your phone a lot, because you're going to have limited space and all of that. But then it's really a matter of deciding like which is your digital photo hub, right? Is it iCloud? Is it your computer? Is it your phone? Like, where is that one place? And being mindful of that. I feel like when people get in trouble, it's when they don't understand whether they are syncing or backing up, whether they are saving it there permanently, or whether it's a sort of a method of getting it to their digital photo hub. So I can just tell you really quickly, in my case, I actually offload my phone. I know that seems probably for a photo organizer, I guess that seems fairly old school, but I actually really enjoy having a permanent archive on my computer. And I offload my phone, and my phone and iCloud is merely a transportation system
I love
to
the way you worded
to get
that.
things where they need to go. Yeah,
I've never
yeah.
heard it put like that. Is your phone, and I think for a lot of people, they can cut through everything and just really answer that one question. Is my phone a
Hmm.
transportation hub to
Hmm.
get to my photos, or is it a storage device? And I think if you can answer that question right there, it kind of tells you where you need to go from.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about making decisions, When you set up a system, it's that decision making, and that's why we as professional organizers always have a lot of work because setting up systems, is not easy. It takes a lot of finessing to make sure you get it right, and there's a lot of decision making there. But once you make those decisions, it becomes really clear what needs to happen next. And that's why I love this as a strategy. Kind of it reveals itself what needs to happen next.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the schematic. I think even just looking at that
Hmm.
and seeing the flow chart, it helped me so much kind of declutter, and I'm like, "Oh, you know what? This kind of makes sense when you see where everything is going and you have it right there in front of you." I'm a visual person, of course. A lot of photographers are, like you stated. So super, super, super helpful. We had a question from Starkey360 asking if you have a certain naming convention for your photos.
Yeah, and that's another great question. And again, it comes down to decision making because obviously, if you are storing your photos in just folders on your computer, for example, which I do have clients who still do that, a naming convention is so helpful to kind of instantly see what you're dealing with. And then I would suggest year, month, date, and perhaps the event or something like that. We always want to start with the year and then the month and the date so that the computer sort of naturally sorts it for us. If you start with something like, August or September 17th, it's going to sort alphabetically, and that's not going to help you. It's going to always be easier if you have it chronologically sorted.
Okay. Now we
If
had a
you are,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, yeah, I just wanted to mention really quickly too, if you are in a system where you're not really looking at your photos uh, sideways, I guess I should call it, where maybe the metadata doesn't display or the photo name doesn't display. Apple Photos is one of those systems. Uh, do you really need a naming convention?
Mm,
Um, Perhaps not.
good point. Good point. I didn't think about that one either. Now, I'm going to test myself here, Caroline. We had a question come in. Beth is asking, what do you do after you have set up your ecosystem and then get a new source of photo, say from a relative who passes away? For example, I don't know how to add outside photos to Apple Photos. Would that be plugged in to on that flow chart? like the one, would that be considered like a one-time, that's a one-time deposit kind of thing where you have your system, it's not going to uphinge or uproot your system, that gets sourced into, this is just a one-time thing that I handle?
Apologies, I missed part of the question. What was the source of the photos?
Yeah, so the source of the photos is just like a one-time, like a relative passes away and you're taking their photos over. Is that something that just fits in like on that flow chart that you had? Is that something that plugs into the one-time photo section where you have, it's not going to uproot your photo workflow. It's just going to fit in for that. I only have to deal with these one time and then they get cataloged and then they're kind of stored away and you don't have to worry about them again. I think we might have lost Caroline. We'll give it just a moment here.
Okay, I'm back. My
There you
apologies.
go.
My
No
apologies.
worries. No worries. So for
Give
the
me just
one-time
I heard most of
photos.
the yeah, I heard most of it.
So
But they cut
so
out just a little.
yeah, so how do you handle that? Is that something that do you have to set up your ecosystem, or is that something that just goes into that, like on the flow chart where you have the one-time photos that you just handle them one time,
Mhm.
they're stored and then they're out of your hair. They don't really work into the
Yeah,
rest of your workflow, right?
yeah. So anytime you have a photo dump of some sort, no matter where it comes from, it's making the decision of, is it a one-time thing, or is this going to happen over and over and over again, the same source? So let's say you get a new job and all of a sudden the work is making you use, I don't know, let's say Dropbox for something, and that's going to be going forward several times for years and years, that's something that you're going to want to treat as a recurring stream of photos. If it's a one-time thing where somebody's handing you something, or maybe somebody shares photos from an event, uh, just think to yourself, is this a stream that I'm going to tackle over and over again? Or is it a one-time project where I just have to import and deposit the photos basically into the little bank and then we're done? Um, and sometimes what I like to recommend too is that you designate a way that you want to receive photos. You are allowed to do that. So sometimes what I say to people is, look, I'm going to send you a link. If you have photos to share with me from this event, upload them here. Here's the link. And it goes all into that one place that I have designated. And I do a lot of event, planning and event memory making, I should call it, and that type of thing with my friends. And I'm always designated memory maker, of course, as the photo organizer in the group. And I provide them with a folder basically where they deposit all of their stuff from all of their phones into my folder. And then I only have to deal with that one folder. And that folder is actually a recurring stream for me. So it's like whenever I go to an event with the same people, they know they're going to get a link from me, and that's where the photos go. So you're allowed to say that to people. People are always going to share with you what they use, but you can put that anywhere you want, and you can actually say, hey, how about I send you a link, and it goes directly into my system.
Easy. I think that's what we're all missing. Everybody has the photographer in their group. You really need the photo organizer in your group as well. That's the important part.
Correct.
We're going to sneak
Correct.
one last question in here. Photo organizing stuff is asking if you go over in your DPO flow course, do you go over removing duplicates and organizing also?
Yes, so let me clarify that. So DPO flow is basically the first step in my course. And my course is called DPO Pro. So there are more steps in DPO Pro, obviously once we've got the ecosystem figured out, then yes, we go into the organizing part, and that's where deduplication comes in and all of those things. And then more of that. So yes, absolutely. It's a much bigger course. This is just sort of the first step that I outline for people. My students are not allowed to progress to the organizing part, let's put it that way, until they have figured out where and what's happening. And I find once we've sorted that out, 90% of their problems go away. And then the rest is smooth sailing from there.
Awesome. Well, we had a ton of comments in there saying how great this was. Super helpful. A lot of really, really, really good tips and information. For me, the visual part of it was probably like the top thing. It's like just to see it and see how it all lays out there really, really, really helped. There you are. We'll get you on
Yes, and
for
my apologies for the internet.
No, no worries.
The
Hey,
joys of travel tech.
that's it. Look,
Yeah,
hey, we still got the information out to the people, and that's what we wanted to do here. Huge thank you to you for joining us, Caroline. Any closing words for everyone?
absolutely. Just get your photos in order. They're so important to us, you know. It really is worth to learn. They just enjoy, you know, you enjoy so much and they enrich your life so much. And it's a skill that's actually not that hard. Once you get a hang of it, it looks difficult. It's not that hard to get a hang of it once you put a little bit of effort in. So I would just encourage everybody to sort of up their organizing skills, and it helps you throughout your life, you know, with anything that you're trying to manage. Systems run everything in the world, and the more of a grip we have on our systems, the better things go, the easier things go. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. And again, if we didn't get to a question, I'm open via email and messages and all of that. So happy to help.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I let Caroline say it. Systems run everything. Find a good system, and you'll be good. As
Yep.
we've learned here with all the photo managers presentations, you guys always bring such great information and try to help out. I think the majority of us are unorganized, so huge thank you to you guys for trying to get us there. But start
Not
today.
for
There's no
long.
better time. Yeah, not for long. Hopefully, I say it every time. I'm like, I'm gonna get it organized. One day I will. But huge thank you to you, Caroline, for joining us. And for everybody out there, all of our viewers, if you haven't caught up with Save Your Photos Month, we have more coming. We've had some in the past that you want to get caught up on. I believe we did drop the links into the YouTube chat for those. And again, as I always say, if you head over to YouTube, B&H Event Space, we have you covered. Free education, this and all of our other live and recorded content is on there. That is all we have for you for now. Another edition of the B&H Event Space in the books. Catch y'all next time.